Hi there, my name is Meredith Burnett and I'm the VBA's Principal Research Advisor. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I am hosting this webinar is of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung and the Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation and has been for more than 40,000 years. I wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners, and I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present and Aboriginal elders of any other communities who may be here today. Welcome to you all. I am thrilled to be able to walk you through the VBA's Research Grant Program for 2024. The recording of this webinar and any web link I mentioned throughout the webinar will be made available to you afterwards. As you can see, we're going to chat through what the VBA's role is and what our approach is. We're going to talk about research broadly at the VBA, our application, selection and award process for our research grants. There's space for you guys to have any questions and hopefully we'll be able to provide them with answers. And then we'll go through what the next steps would be if you would like to apply for a grant, and I hope you do. Please feel free to submit any questions that you have via the Q&A chat function during the webinar. Our team is going to be available to answer your questions either in the chat room or we can answer some questions live at the end of the webinar. And after we finish today, we'll be updating all of our FAQs on the research grant page of the VBA's website. You'll receive a link to that page along with a post-webinar survey following the end of today's session. I'm now going to talk you through the role of the VBA and how we approach regulation of the building and plumbing industries in Victoria. So the VBA provides oversight of practitioner capability through effective and efficient registration and licensing processes. We also monitor industry compliance with building and plumbing standards and regulations through proactive inspections and our audit programs. You can read about those on our website if you're not familiar with them already. We use our enforcement powers to achieve compliance and we act in the public interest. So as an example, feel free to check out our recent social media posts because we had some successful prosecutions recently. Next, we apply our intelligence data, including through research and analytics, to better inform our regulatory strategy and approach. And finally, we use and share our technical knowledge and expertise to improve the regulatory system itself, to support builders and plumbers and other practitioners in the delivery of positive outcomes for consumers. So how do we do that? How do we regulate to improve consumer outcomes? We prioritise our resources and our regulatory efforts specifically on areas that pose the greatest risk of harm to consumer outcomes. What is a harm? It's a problem that causes a detriment to the community or undermines the outcomes that the VBA strives to deliver. So this is why our research themes, which we'll talk about more shortly, are all about improving outcomes and having a positive impact for consumers. Our approach and what those regulatory priorities are is outlined in a document called our Regulatory Policy Statement, which you can see pictured on screen. That document is about the VBA as a whole, but the strategy outlined in it reflects the approach that we've taken in guiding our research program too. It's a really useful document and I highly recommend that you have a look at it, especially if you're going to apply for a grant. The VBA uses all of its regulatory powers and tools to support safe and compliant consumer outcomes. Those tools range from providing education services to help practitioners maintain their competency. So for example, you can see some of our practitioner education series webinars, which are on our website, as well as sanctioning or using disciplinary powers to directly address poor practitioner behaviours. So if you'd like to read that document, you can find that on our Research Grants Program 2024 webpage. It's listed under important information, but you will get a link after the webinar finishes. Let's now talk about the VBA's research program. So the VBA has a statutory function under the Building Act to conduct or promote research relevant to the building and plumbing industries. We execute that function through our research program. Our research program is quite broad. We may perform research ourselves, particularly within the research and evaluation team. We may procure research directly from an external source, consulting company, for example, and we have our research grant program. That's where you come in. The research program is a key strategic platform that the VBA uses to provide evidence to inform regulatory decisions and to influence improvements to the building regulatory system as a whole. The 4 objectives that you can see on your screen are about our research program. So the research we conduct helps us to first better understand or identify major regulatory harms, the needs of consumers, and how regulatory interventions can be shaped to improve safety and consumer outcomes. Because a regulator is just one party in a wider regulatory system, collaboration is extremely important in making sure that our research has impact, such as maximising outcomes to community through practitioner competencies or perhaps policy initiatives. Our research is primarily applied research. We're seeking to find solutions to specific problems or to advance our understanding of systemic issues and the options for resolution. You can read all about our past and current research projects on the VBA's website, which will give you just a bit of a flavour of the kind of research that we love to do. So on this slide, I've given you an overview of the objectives of the research program at the VBA as a whole. But what about the research grant program itself, which is a small part of that? Small but significant, of course. Now, if you make an application for a VBA grant, and I very much hope you do, you'll need to bear in mind the broad objectives of the research program that I've just shown you, as well as the specific objectives of the research grant program. First up, impact. Simply put, we want to deliver tangible benefits to Victorians. We do that by alignment of the research we support with our regulatory policy statement, which I outlined earlier as our current strategic plan. We also regularly monitor and report on the impact of research conducted through the research program as a whole. So the measurability of impact is really important, and we will talk more about that soon in this webinar. All right, second objective, excellence. We think the VBA is known for providing grants that lead to the delivery of outstanding research. Our grant program has a rigorously applied assessment process, and we hope to engage with the brightest academic minds in Australia. Now that's you. Next up is efficiency. We ensure that the spend of our budget delivers value to Victoria. We work efficiently to do so. And connection is the final one. We use our data, our stakeholder relationships to advance the research we support. We might be able to open a door to data, for example, or to people with specific skills or knowledge, or to a network of experts that you've been seeking. So those are our objectives. Let's now look at our past grant rounds. In 2021, our key themes were reasonably broad. We looked at water ingress and we looked at fire safety. And you can see on the screen that in 2021, we gave 3 grants away: University of Tasmania, RMIT, and Deakin University. In 2022, we narrowed our focus based on what we learned from our 2021 research. And you can see that we ended up with 3 projects that looked at increasing compliance through resilience, through practitioner competency, through preventing defects. There was no grant round in 2023. So when you look at this slide, I hope you see what I do, and that is diversity. There is so much diversity in the academic backgrounds of these researchers. There's also diversity in their approach. Some were more technical. So for example, Rebecca Yang, whose work was heavily based on the NCC and standards, while others took a qualitative approach. So Nicole Johnson, she conducted a series of interviews, for example, as part of her work. There was also a lot of diversity in the VBA's in-kind contributions to these projects. So some used our data, some accessed our subject matter experts, and some explored our networks within industry and the regulatory system. So what I hope you can see from this is that we're not looking for any one kind of researcher, nor any one kind of particular approach to research. We are looking for applications that match our strategic goals and provide tangible benefits to the Victorian community. So now I'm going to play for you a video which is hosted by Samantha Adricum. Samantha's our Manager of Research and Evaluation here at the VBA, and she'll be talking to some of our past grant recipients. So you hear about some of the research they conducted while supported by VBA grants and their experiences interacting with the VBA.
Hi, I'm Samantha Adricum, the Manager of the Research and Evaluation team here at the VBA. Really pleased that you could join us today. Let's hear from some past grant recipients about their research and some of their insights about the research grant program.
Hello all, it is Professor Peter S.P. Wong from RMIT University. I'm the Associate Dean in Construction Management.
My name is Rebecca Young. I'm an Associate Professor at RMIT University. I lead a solar energy application lab in the School of Property Construction and Project Management.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Dewsbury. I'm a Senior Lecturer at the University of Tasmania within Architecture and Design.
My name is Ariana Brambilla and I'm Associate Professor at the University of Sydney.
Hi Ariana, thanks for joining us today to have a chat about your research and your experience with the Research Grant Program. Can you tell us in just a couple of sentences what your research is about?
Our research project is about increasing the moisture resilience of standard construction in Victoria.
My research is about developing a world first ever virtual reality based self-evaluation platform to reduce the compliance risks associated with building and plumbing works in Victoria.
My research project aims to understand the fire safety risks associated with the installation of building integrated photovoltaics, so-called BIPV, on the facades of multiple story buildings.
Since 2008, my team has been exploring the thermal improvement of building envelopes and their interrelationship with interior air quality and surface and interstitial mold.
What real-world impact do you hope that your research will have?
The real-world impact is really important. The Australian building regulations are a mechanism to fix problems when the market has not. So what that means is that we can only get our new building regulations when we've proved that buildings are falling apart or people are getting sick. So within that context of condensation mold, it had to be proven that we have a national problem prior to any new regulations being proposed.
This project indeed is a breakthrough. It demonstrates the use of immersive technology to enrich the builders' and plumbers' knowledge in compliance risks. This provides a practical and economical alternative for the builders and plumbers to be trained on their own pace at anywhere.
How did the VBA support you during the research project?
So VBA is supporting us with not only their, of course, extensive experience on the context in Victoria, but also helping us with organizing and being in contact with the important stakeholder across the state that could actually provide insightful comments and suggestions for our research. So we are always in this constant conversation with VBA, and it's a very, I would say, collaborative approach to research.
In our case, during the project, VBA helped us to identify a lot of interviewees, especially in the regulatory framework, to help us to answer questions and give insights of that. We also had many meetings together to discuss the details when we explain the situation and present the results in the report.
How did you find the application process?
Yes, it was very easy to follow. The format was very clear. And I also have to say that being used to academic grant writing, it was very quick and efficient.
So based on your experience, what advice would you give to someone who's thinking of applying for a VBA research grant?
My advice is that VBA grant indeed provides the flexibilities for the applicants to think of the topics with a wide range of scope that might fit your expertise to write up a proposal.
My advice would be, if you are considering to apply, apply. We were applying a little bit being unsure about the results, but I think that we are all happy that we actually decided to apply at the end.
Is there anything else you'd like to add about the VBA's research grant program?
This funding opportunity would help researchers to enlarge our networks, especially in the regulatory domain.
Within the national competitive world of research, it is great that the VBA has developed this scheme. Whereas some grant schemes focus on big ideas, the VBA scheme is grounded within the immediate needs of the people of Victoria. I really commend the VBA on developing this scheme, and I look forward to seeing what research is published from future projects.
Thanks so much for joining us today and sharing some insights into your research and the research grant program.
So let's move to the present. what is our focus for 2024? It's quite broad again this year. We're looking for applications that focus on one of two things. First of all, any one or more of our 6 regulatory priorities. So you can see those 6 priorities on the side. They are water. So that's addressing harms arising from water ingress and water damage. So we're talking moisture in buildings, mold, structural deterioration, water supply contamination, or maybe even events like flooding. The second is fire safety. That's addressing harms arising from improper design or installation of building fire safety measures or essential safety measures, improper service penetrations, even harms that could lead to fire itself. The third is product safety. That's addressing harms arising from non-compliant, non-conforming or inappropriate products and materials. The solvency of building companies, that's not just Phoenix activity, but insolvency also. Practitioner capability and practitioner capacity and capability. So that's supporting registered and licensed practitioners to maintain their skills, helping people enter the industry and gain their registration or license. And the last is practitioner competency. So that's addressing harms caused by rogue operators who are unregistered, unlicensed, and don't have the required skills or competencies, particularly where they fail to comply with legislation or standards, leaving consumers with unsafe or non-compliant outcomes. So those are our 6 regulatory priorities. Our website provides a lot of information about every one of those priorities. So please go look. If your application will relate to one of those 6 priorities, your application form that you fill out will ask you to tell us how your research links to those priorities. So you'll be doing yourself a very good turn by going to our website and reading through what those harms are and how we address them. Okay, so that's the first option for research for 2024. The second option would be for research that focuses on new or emerging harms that arise from products, materials, practices, or technologies. So, for example, one of our research grantees in 2021 looked at building integrated photovoltaics. So if you choose this second path, your application should clearly articulate what the harm is and why it might be significant to the community. So that's our focus for this year. I'm next going to give you a quick rundown of the how, the where, the what, the process from application through to award. Again, full details are available on the Research Grant 2024 page of the VBA's website. Applications close Tuesday, 2nd of April 2024. Please be aware that Monday the 1st of April is a public holiday. This is not an April Fool's joke. They do close on the Tuesday, just a little bit unusual. Applications will be assessed against a published selection criteria by an assessment panel within the VBA. So they close on the 2nd of April, and then across April to June, those applications get assessed. A decision about the grants is made late June, early July. And then across August and September is where we organise agreements between universities and ourselves. So we anticipate the actual research projects themselves would start to commence from September of 2024. Now that's a planned and ideal schedule, and not everything goes to plan. So start dates might be earlier or later depending on what the successful applicants are looking for, but that's broadly what we expect at this stage. All information, everything you need to know about how to apply is on our website, and I've put an image there for you of what the actual application form looks like. You can see that there's a little handy checklist on the front that talks about each of the sections within the application. So please use it to make sure that you've filled out all sections. Basically, it is a downloadable form. It's a PDF. You complete that form electronically, and then you attach it to an email and send it to us at research@vba.vic.gov.au before midnight on Tuesday, the 2nd of April. Now, you're probably wondering, that's feeling good, that's a form, but what does a strong application form look like? Your application needs to be well written and evidence-based, and as academics, I know that you likely already know that, but your consideration of your methodology and how you go about what you aim to achieve, we'd love that to be very clear. So if you're planning to use data, for example, it would be a good idea for you to tell us how you plan to locate that data, get access to that data, and what you plan to do to analyse the data. You'd likewise like to give us confidence that any parties you need to involve will be available and able to participate. And please also do let us know in your application if your proposal for grant funding will be used to fund PhD students, because we consider that to be a positive impact of our grant program too. The application form includes explanatory information about what we're looking for, so please read that closely, because if the information you supply doesn't correspond to what we're asking for, we may need to make our assessment only on what you supply, and that may effectively be a non-answer. Interestingly, in previous years, the area of submitted applications where we often find the least amount of detail is in the risk section. But that's really important for us so that we can have assurance that every aspect of the research is feasible. So please do make sure that you consider the risks associated with the execution of your proposed research. So what might go wrong? Because things might go off track, as things are wont to do. So what will you do if that happens? So now I'll briefly go over the selection criteria that the assessment panel will consider each application against. All right, there are 5 criteria. These criteria are not weighted. They have been informed by our experience in previous rounds of the research grants, and at times applications haven't provided enough information on those areas, so we've specifically called each of them out. I'm going to touch on each of these briefly, but once again, full criteria that all applications are assessed against and some handy examples for each criterion are available on the Research Grant 2024 page of our website. So the first criterion is strategy. So please make sure that your application addresses how it relates to the VBA's regulatory priorities or new or emerging harms. The second is collaboration and innovation. We are really keen for other industry partners or perhaps even other areas of government to be involved. It doesn't need to be the Victorian state government. I mean, you could include councils, for example. In past grant rounds, the VBA has often not been the only contributor to the research. And we find that the diversity of contributors often provides significant insight to the research itself. The third is methodology and resourcing. We want to be satisfied that the research is going to deliver on your objectives. So if you state that clearly, we'll understand what steps you plan to take, and we'll understand what it is that you want to do and how you want to achieve it. The fourth one is research translation and impact, my personal favorite. Show us that your research has real world impact, and we're going to talk more about that on the next slide. And the final criterion there is value for money. So this is value for the VBA, of course, but also for the Victorian community. So this criterion is not about getting the best price, it's about delivering the best value, which isn't always in dollars. So a big part of that might be, who else is contributing to the research and what's the nature of that contribution, for example. Assessment of applications against those criteria is via a 3-person assessment panel. So there'll be the state building surveyor, for example, and I believe our chief analyst will also be involved. There are 2 key criteria that I would like to emphasise. Of those 5, 2 key criteria, because how they are addressed really makes the difference between a weaker application and a really strong one. So the first one of those is strategy. Make sure your application aligns with the purpose of the grant program. So it needs to look at either key existing harms in the regulatory policy statement, state which one and how, or the emerging harms if you're going down that pathway, as we talked about earlier. So strategy is really important. And the next one is research translation and impact. So I suggest that you make sure your application highlights how your research can be translated into real world impact. You can see a little yellow cartoon on this screen. Some of you might be familiar with Professor Reed, who was the source of that image. It gives you some great examples of how academic research can make measurable change. So how will you or how will the VBA measure impact driven by your research? This is what we'd love for you to be able to demonstrate to us. What difference you hope your research could make and how over time you'd see that happening within the community. Are you hoping to impact the content of guidelines or standards? Are you hoping to save money for consumers by identifying a common harm earlier than we presently do? Are you identifying and resolving issues of product safety? This is a new criterion that we've introduced this year because we want our research to be applied in nature and impactful in achieving consumer outcomes. And a strong application would reflect that. The award process, what does the award process and post-award process for successful applicants look like? First of all, the funding agreement. So to accept a grant, a university needs to enter into a funding agreement with the VBA. We actually have a template of this agreement available for your reference on our website. I'll give you that link later after the webinar. I encourage you to have a look at that agreement so you understand the type of terms and conditions that the VBA would be looking for. That template also provides within one of its schedules, I think it's Schedule 4, our expectations about the quality of research reports that would be delivered under a VBA grant. Because our aim is for research supported by our grant program to be published on our website, perhaps also promoted by social media, shared with key government and industry stakeholders. For that to occur, our expectations need to be reflected in any work, particularly written work, generated by the grants. So once the research commences, we take a milestone-based approach where we ask applicants to demonstrate their progress along the way, share their insights with us along the way. There are reporting requirements for successful applicants, but happily it's not onerous. So we look at quarterly progress reporting, so just on progress and budget. And the timing of that is all outlined in the template agreement between VBA and the university. This step really for us is all about governance and assurance. It just lets us see if any risks are arising and let us support our researchers if we need to along the way. And the final point there is about the ongoing support that the VBA can and does offer during research. We take a really flexible approach to ongoing support, and we tend to modify our interactions based on the risk and complexity of the research. So we have sort of check-in or keep in touch meetings as the research requires. The kind of in-kind support that we offer differs per project. You might be looking for example, access to our subject matter experts. So our principal fire safety engineer, for example, provided insights to Professor Yang for her research. We may link your research team to people who may have influence on policy. So for example, Dr. Johnson interviewed the State Building Surveyor, Andrew Cellini. And we've also invited other government figures to advisory meetings during past research. In-kind support might include access to our data. So for example, to case studies. We provided to the University of Tasmania information about external wall systems from houses constructed in Victoria, and data about non-compliances were provided to Nicole Johnson. So if you need data from the VBA, you can see what we have available on our website, and you should look to find out what data we hold. If you don't know about that, you can always send us an email to inquire about whether we have it. And lastly, those regular check-in meetings there, we understand that not everything goes to plan. It's fine. And we aim to work out, to find out if you need anything from us to get everything back on track. So that's really what that is about. So I'm going to be holding some space at the end of this presentation for some questions if you have them. Please feel free to keep typing in the Q&A chat. But before we get to that, I'm just going to quickly provide for you some of the most commonly asked Qs, and I'll be giving you some As. So if you have questions that you'd like to speak to, I'd ask you to hold on for a moment while I just whip through the most common ones. All right, here we go. The most common question we get asked: how much funding is available? How much is in the bucket? We haven't actually set a cap for individual grants. We don't disclose the overall program budget, but it's not unlimited. To give you a guide, our financial contributions in past years have ranged from about $30,000 to about $110,000, plus significant in-kind support. So the short answer is, oh, there's no cap. But the long answer is, our contribution to successful research grants is based on scale, complexity, our budget, our resource capacity. We may offer to partially fund your research, so not fully fund it, but fund a part of it. We may ask you to consider breaking the research program to smaller components or identifying other research partners who may be able to support and participate also. We're very open to supporting projects with other contributors, but if you do have other contributors to your research, we'd like to know who they are up front in your application form. And we'll be looking in your application form to see what kind of contribution your university would make. We encourage you very much to present your proposed research project in the application form in stages with corresponding milestones and deliverables. Ultimately, we're just looking to support research that prevents good money for VBA and for Victorian consumers. Okay, is there a time limit for completing the research? We are looking for the research to be completed within a reasonable time. The duration of successful applications in past years was from about 10 to 24 months. We appreciate that some research requires a longer time frame, so if that's you, bear in mind it would be really ideal if you can demonstrate your progress and your insights along the way. We often adopt a stage approach to the release of funding. So we would have, you know, a small amount at milestone 1, more at milestone 2, more at milestone 3, and so forth. And once again, please have a look in the example agreement that we have on our website of that schedule for the funding agreement for written research reports, because that will give you, I guess, more of an indication of what it is that you would need to deliver. All right, are there restrictions on how the grant funding can be used? Yes, and that's all in the draft funding agreement template that's available on our website. Being informed about this is another benefit that you'll get from reviewing that agreement before you apply for a grant. But in short, our financial contribution is largely intended as a contribution to the salaries of researchers at the educational institution. It's not intended to cover costs of things like research that's already funded elsewhere, or your core operating costs, or passing that on to the private sector to undertake part of the research for you, or for infrastructure that you already own, and so forth. Next question, intellectual property. Do we propose to own the IP associated with the research? No, we are not seeking to own any intellectual property resulting from the research supported through a research grant, but we are asking for the grantee to grant the VBA license to use, reproduce, and adapt the funded IP for our purposes, and to allow publishing of the funded IP, which would be what you produce, on our intranet, website, social media platforms, however is agreed with the grantee. So this would be a condition of funding of agreement between the VBA and the grantee. So that would again be in that funding agreement template. All right, next question. Past applicants. Some of you here today may have applied for a VBA grant in past rounds, 21 or 22, and are wondering about whether you're eligible to apply again. So the short answer to that is yes. And the longer answer is, if you were not successful in a previous year, absolutely you can reapply. You could apply with an entirely new research topic or the same previous topic that you were unsuccessful with previously, but only if that topic is still relevant to this year's research grant focus. Research proposals have to provide new insights or information above that which is readily available. That can extend on previous research that has or is currently being undertaken, or it can be a completely new area of research. But please note that you must submit your application using the new 2024 application form, not the old application form, and you will get that link following the webinar. In-kind support. What kind of in-kind support can the VBA provide? I did touch on that briefly earlier, but it could include access to case studies or information, assuming that there are no confidentiality or private sensitive information considerations of those kind. Access to regulatory experts and technical specialists at the VBA. So we have a number of highly skilled staff at the VBA. So they could review technical specifications, they could support you in understanding or interpreting provisions in codes and standards, be interviewed by you, review and provide feedback on draft research reports or any other deliverables, and we will take into account the impact on our resources in providing you in-kind support as part of our contribution to the research. we do expect to be involved in some way, and we do expect to articulate what kind of in-kind support you are looking for in your application. A hot tip for you would be to please provide detail on what you're seeking from us and how that would assist the research. So don't simply ask, for example, for access to data broadly. You'll want to tell us what kind of data, why it's required, how it will be used, and how it will assist the research to lead to impact to the community. So in that way, you'd be showing us how you've thought about what and why and how the VBA should ideally contribute to your research. Next question, publication and media. What approach do we take in releasing our completed research? We love to take a collaborative approach, and we like to have our communications area work with universities' communications areas. You can have a look at our social media channels to see how we release research. We think that a joint release is likely to amplify the reach and the impact of your research. So there are benefits for you as well in communicating broadly in a planned and agreed way. The final FAQ is, can I discuss my proposal, my research proposal with someone at the VBA? We want to ensure fairness to all applicants. So for that reason, we're not providing feedback on the merits or likely success of any research idea or proposal. What we can do is provide clarification on the intent of the grant program itself and the outcomes we're seeking through it. It'll most likely be me to engage with if you have questions. I'll be addressing a lot of those emails, and I won't be involved in the assessment of applications. I'm not on the panel. So yeah, you can always ask if you are sure, and if we cannot answer, we will tell you transparently and hopefully very politely. So I have addressed the most common frequently asked questions here today. There are some more available on our website. We have an FAQ section about the grant, and as I said, we will be updating those FAQs based on any questions that we get during today's webinar. Well, thank you all so much for coming along the journey so far. I can see that we do have a question that's been asked. So I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Samantha Adricum, who's the Manager of Research and Evaluation at the VBA, and she'll be joining me to answer these questions. Sam, would you like to jump up and say hello?
Hi everyone, really glad that you could join us today. I'm really excited to see what applications we receive in this round of the grant program.
Thanks, Sam. So the question that I can see is from Adrian, and Adrian is asking, in the application form for Part G of the budget, is there some way to explain or justify the budget items?
Thanks for this question, Adrian. And we're happy to take an attachment to the application form. I've just made a note. It's about continuous improvement, that if we have a further round of the grant program, we will include some explanatory information about that in the application form. So hopefully those of you who've been on the journey with us over the last 3 rounds of the grant program will see that there's been ongoing continuous improvement, and it's based on feedback from you. So thank you for that question. You can add that as an attachment to the application form.
Great. Are there any other questions that have been that anyone has on their mind? I'll just give a few moments for anyone to type in whatever it is that they're thinking about. But if nothing comes up, and if you have that thing where you walk out of the webinar and then you're like, oh, I should have asked, blah, 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 you can always send your email through to research@vba.vic.gov.au. But it looks like we've been so very thorough, Sam, in providing information that there are no more questions. So I think we'll just move along to the next slide. Yeah, after this webinar closes, we'll be sending through our post-webinar survey. Now, it's probably no surprise that we love data and we love continuous improvement, much like many of you here today do the same. So we would hope that you please do fill out that survey. We'd love to receive your feedback. It really helps us to understand who it is that we're connecting with and how we can do things even better. We are going to put a recording of this webinar and the slides from the webinar with the links that I've mentioned on our website on the 2024 research grant page. I will leave you today though with my encouragement for you to apply for a grant. Please do read the documents and guidance we've provided on our website. Applications close on the 2nd of April. If you have any questions in the meantime, you can visit our website to see the FAQ, or as I said, you can email us at research@vba.vic.gov.au. Thank you all for your attendance. I hope you found this webinar to be useful. We really look forward to receiving your applications. I'd like to take a moment to thank the previous award recipients for sharing their insights via the video that we played earlier. Yeah, we'll publish this webinar on our website and update FAQs. So thank you so much for your time today, everybody, and take care.